afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. All right, so it's our second session, and you should be very excited, not just because it's another great session on leadership and leadership and change, but because today is actually the most important session for your immediate careers. And I'll explain throughout the session why I think that is the case, but today we're talking about power and politics. My guess is that most of you don't think that power and politics is very, very high up on your agenda right now, right? That this is something if you are a senior executive, right? This is something that you worry about if you're the CEO or the president or the division head or something. But I'm going to convince you today that this is something that you want to manage from the very first day in your job. So, how many of you are excited about the prospect of managing politics in your next job? Yeah, so not that many, right? It's, as I said, right? It's something that is actually not that, let's say, that savory, right? It has this unsavory flavor to it. And there's a French philosopher called Jean Baudrillard, and he is one of the key representatives of the postmodernist and post-structuralist movement. And he has this wonderful quote thinking about power. You see it there. So if you are in contact with men who wield power or authority, that leaves an intangible sense of repulsion. Yeah? And it's like being close to fecal matter. Yeah? So that's his attitude. Yeah? Now, when we talk about power today, I'm not going to hold a very preachy moral lecture for you. Right? I don't think that will do anything. You have a moral compass in you that I have to trust. Just talking one session about this is not going to change that in any meaningful way, right? So that's why I'm not even going there. Yeah? It would make sense if we had a course on ethics, right? We had like 2 weeks to really talk about, ethical dilemmas in business and so on and so forth. But just talking about like the ethical side of power in one session, I don't think really makes much sense. So if you're being given the responsibility to lead a team, to lead an organization, to manage resources, right? There is of course a lot of responsibility attached to it. In other words, and you might be more familiar with this one, with great power comes great responsibility, right? You know that, right? So we have that, actually a lot of people have used that sentiment. And if you think about that, that's a big weight on your shoulders, right? It's a big weight on your shoulders. Carrying that responsibility and performing according to the high expectations of others if you're given power, especially for young managers, for young leaders as you are yourself, that can be a lot. Right? And maybe there is a sense of apprehension, maybe there's a sense of anxiety there that makes you say, I'm not sure I want this, right? So that's another reason why people shy away from power. Now, one of the guys that has been holding up the banner for the importance of power and politics in the business school community or in the business research community is Jeff Pfeffer at Stanford. He's been writing about this for more than 30 years. He's been teaching the power and politics course at Stanford for I think just about 30 years. And he wrote a wonderful piece in Harvard Business Review a couple of years back where he summarized why he thinks there's such a negative association and such a resistance to dealing with power with young managers, right, with business school students. And he has 3 reasons why he thinks that is. And I think those reasons are really nicely explaining why people shy away from it. So the first one is the just world hypothesis. Do you know about this just world hypothesis? Did you talk about this in OB? No? So, in our minds, implicitly, we want to believe that the world is a just place, that those that do good, that work hard, are being rewarded, right? Now, you could say that, well, that's clearly not reality, right? So those that are working hard do not always get rewarded. And that's true, we do qualify this. But the underlying assumption for people that are sane is that the world is just, right? And that's a very, very important basis for you to function as a human being. Imagine the opposite, that your fundamental assumption is that the world is unjust. That's your fundamental assumption, that's your default. Imagine what it would do to you. You probably wouldn't even get up in the morning out of bed. Because what's the point? Right? If the world is fundamentally unjust, you're not going to make any effort at all. You're not going to try to go to school, you're not going to try to learn, you're not going to try to impress your boss, because nothing is going to come of it. Right? So as a fundamental assumption for your psychological functioning, it is very important that, and it is actually automatic, that you believe, generally speaking, the world is just. Not always you qualify, right? But the underlying assumption is the world is just. If I work hard, I can make it. At least with 90% certainty, right? So that's the underlying assumption. All right, so we know what power is. We're relational property, right? So relative dependence between people, and we know what politics is. And it's essentially about gaining power and using power to influence people. All right, so let me ask you, just in terms of brainstorming, what do you think, if you project yourself to completing the PGP program, you get your job, what sources of power do you have in the job that you take?